Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and this is my checklist book. It's called Kung Fu Pulp, Kung Fu and Martial Arts, series of novels that I composed way back when. It's quite outdated now, and I have a section here on martial arts comic book series characters. And so I start off with Judo Master, as you can see there. In the Charlton comics being the oldest, he was the first martial arts superhero uh, in comic books. So Charlton Comics, considered to be the third string publisher of comic books at the time. This would be this one's from 1967-66. They published a string of comic books, some of which were inspired and notable, particularly the comic book work of people like Steve Ditko, Dick Giordano, and John Byrne. They all worked at Charlton, including Jim Aparo. Jim Aparo did some Phantom in Charlton comics. In 1965, Dick Giordano became the chief editor at Charlton, which resulted in a line of interesting and surprisingly creative comic book series, like Ditko's version of the Blue Beetle, and there was Captain Atom. Then there was Ditko's infamous superhero, The Question. Also in this period were the Fightin' Five, Thunderbolt, Peacemaker, Sarge Steel, and the one you are looking at. This is the Judo Master. Judo Master first appeared here in Special War Series. This is Special War. The real title is Special War Series number 4. It's from November 1965. This comic book, as I said, is considered the first martial arts superhero in Western comic books. People say it's Judo Joe, but he wasn't a superhero. It features Rick Jagger, a U.S. Army sergeant during World War II, who was sent to an island to uproot the Japanese. On this uncharted island, Jagger inadvertently discovers a secretive enclave of ancient samurai warriors headed up by an old white-bearded sensei. He befriends these natives who happen to be secretly resisting the occupation of the Japanese army. Jagger joins the resistance and begins his training in judo with Bunduri and an old sensei. He learns the history of the martial arts from his study of judo, kendo, karate, jiu-jitsu, and you name it, he learned it. He becomes a master of all of them. The Judo Master wears this colorful costume and features a straightforward but quite literate adventures. The writer-artist, Frank McLaughlin, accurately describes the martial arts terminology and history with surprisingly perfect detail way back when this comic book first came out in 1965. Judo Master lasted a few issues for about 2 years. Now, so we're starting off with Charlton. So here is the first. And then back in the 70's, they came out with this book. This is Yang. So Yang first appeared back in 1973 and lasted for about 13 issues, or exactly 13 issues. It's a pale imitation of the Kung Fu TV series with John Carradine. The stories were all written by Joe Gill and drawn by a guy named Warren Sattler. Yang was born Chung Hui, but his father asked him to be Yang to all men. So Yang changed his name. The story follows loosely along the plot created by the Kung Fu TV series, where a young Chinese man, in Yang's case he's really Chinese, is framed for murder and is forced to flee. Somehow he's captured and chained up as a slave and sent to America to work on the railroad with other Chinese coolies. Eventually he jumps ship, still wearing his chains, and escapes. He rebels against the railroad captors and destroys the rail yard, along with the slavers who held him captive. All the conventions that you find in the martial arts movies and the television series are thrown into this comic book series. Everything from the tried and true revenge formula to Yang's baldness. So there you go. That's Yang. That's the first issue. Yeah, it's an interesting cover. The ancient symbol of yin yang. Yin is dark and evil. Yang is light and good. It's kind of simplistic in the way it understands. The symbol comes from Taoism, is what I understand. So that's that one. That's the first issue of Yang. This is the second issue. And that's a Warren Sattler style cover. This one's interesting. And this is a modern comics reprint of the very first issue of the House of Yang. The series first appeared in 1975. The story takes place in the 1940s during the invasion of Japan into China. The stories center around the character of Sun Yang, a Chinese resistance fighter. The writing was done by the Charlton veteran Joe Gill. The story of Sun Yang begins when the Japanese invade his home and kill his family. The artwork in the stories is unique in that San-Ho Kim is not afraid to show graphic sword slashes and violence. The backgrounds are oriental and show an Asian style of sophistication that no one ever saw in Western martial arts comic books in the 70s. And that's largely because San-Ho Kim was from Korea, I believe, South Korea. So he's a real thing. He knew and he drew in the style of one of the first. If you look at the style of the mountain there in the background, he wrote in almost a manhua, what they call manhua or manga. In China, it's called manhua, which is a Chinese for manga. So he really drew in a kind of manga style. So Joe Gill was the writer for these stories, but he was smart enough to realize that Kim was more suited to the Eastern milieu than any other artist. Thus, much of the scenery and martial arts techniques and fighting are distinctly Oriental. San-Ho Kim was the artist that Marvel Comics hired for the last issues of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu for their Sword Quest series. And you'll get to see that when I go through the Marvel books, okay? All right, so this was what? Too Much Too Soon. So that's from Charlton. And there's the original number 2. And you can tell this is all the coloring and everything. That's San-Ho Kim's art style. Like in genuine manga style. All right, so that's that one. And now we're going to pause here and we'll go to Marvel, okay? All right, so here we have the hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, and that's the very first appearance of Shang-Chi in comic books. This series first appeared in 1973, and it was the most successful of all the martial arts series in Western comic books, to be published in the 1970s. Many comic book readers from the 70s seem to agree that this series was the best work that Marvel created at the time. Initially, the character was drawn by artist Jim Starlin. Yep, that's Jim Starlin of the Captain Marvel and Warlock fame. More suited to space opera than he is to martial arts action, but this book in particular sold like hotcakes. The best issues in the series were those written by Doug Monk, that's Moench, but pronounced Monk, and drawn by the inimitable Paul Gulacy. Shang-Chi is really the son of Fu Manchu, and that's who you see on the cover, who's trained by Fu Manchu's own monks to be an assassin. When Fu Manchu sends his son to kill his arch nemesis, Sir Dennis Nayland Smith, Shang-Chi realizes that he is being used by his own father as a pawn. Many of the characters that populate the Fu Manchu stories and novels of Sax Rohmer show up in this inventive series. In the hands of Monk and Gulacy, the adventures moved from its Oriental milieu to a more spy action themes coupled with international intrigue and adventure stories. So that's the first special Marvel edition, the first appearance of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. So I have the first 3 issues there. There's number 15 of Special Marvel Edition. And then 16. And that's the first appearance of Midnight. I think the only appearance. There's a character like him that appeared in the Moon Knights comic books. But I think this is the only appearance of Midnight, or the first appearance and the only appearance of Midnight. All right, so that's number 16. And that's a lower grade copy. 16, and there's number 17. And now in his own mag, that's actually the first full issue and appearance of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, in his own magazine. All right, and then there came Iron Fist. This series first appeared in 1973. Iron Fist was Marvel's next most popular martial arts character. The first appearance is here in Marvel Premiere number 15, drawn by Gil Kane, and Dick Giordano did all the inking. Giordano was the inker who helped create Judo Master, thus some of the similarities in the two characters can be noticed, particularly the mask, the sash, and the cut of the pants, similar to Judo Master. Both costumes were bright and colorful. The origin stories of both series have other similarities. Both Rip Jagger and Daniel Rand learn to become master of the martial arts in a secretive conclave. In the case of Judo Master, it's in a cave. However, in the origin story of Iron Fist, it was far more tragic. Both his parents are die violently when Daniel Rand, his father and mother, along with his father's business partner, Harold Meacham, travel to the mysterious land of Kunlun. Rand's parents die in the quest. His father is killed by Meacham, the business partner, and his mother is killed by a pack of hungry wolves. Iron Fist learns about Kung Fu high up in the Kunlun Mountains, where the mysterious city of Kunlun makes its mystical reappearance every 10 years. When Daniel Rand finishes his training, he faces a unique foe, a dragon, which he eventually subdues. Then he acquires the power of the Iron Fist. Iron Fist has all the conventions that one would expect to find in a superhero comic book, but it nevertheless featured the creative talents of such writers like Dick Giordano, Larry Hama, John Byrne, and writer Chris Claremont, among many others. Right, so that's number 15, Marvel Premiere. And then he had his own book, and this is a lower grade copy of number 1. I have 2 copies, but this is one of them. This is number 1. And it's Iron Fist in the Duel of Iron with Iron Man. All right, so that's that one. And then after Iron Fist issue ended with number 15, he joined Power Man. That's Luke Cage in his book. And this was their first team up in Power Man number 48. And the story continues with number 49. And then they have their names on the cover with number 50. All right, so that's that. All right, another book I want to show is this one. This is Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And just lower this a little bit. Right there. So, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, and the guys you see there are the Sons of the Tiger. So the Marvel magazine Deadly Hands of Kung Fu made its appearance also in 1973. It again featured the creative talents of Dick Giordano on a series like The Sons of the Tiger, along with articles about upcoming martial arts movies and novels. And there are several issues that feature the paperbacks, the martial arts paperbacks that were coming out back in the 70s, in the mid-70s. Shang-Chi also made several appearances in the magazine. In the later issues, the White Tiger and Sword Quest was introduced. And in the final issues was the short-lived martial arts series, The Daughters of the Dragon. but has since been republished. The stories and articles were geared towards adult readers, but the originality of the articles and stories in the magazine made it a must-have for the young martial arts fans of the 1970s. One can enjoy reading and rereading many of the magazines that were published in this time period. The magazine, more than any other, rode the wave of populism brought on by the Kung Fu TV series and the late, great Bruce Lee. So the Sons of the Tiger really modeled after the Bruce Lee film Enter the Dragon, with the three lead characters, one representing Bruce Lee, the other one Jim Kelly, and of course the Bob Diamond, the actor, representing John Saxon. It was a great series of books that came out. So that's the Sons of the Tiger, and they also made the cover of issue number 16. That's issue number 6, and this is issue number 16. And this is a breakout, the Sons of the Tiger in a riot of martial arts mayhem. All right. Also featured in the Sons of the Tiger, in the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu books, was the White Tiger. And this is one of his first cover appearances, one of his early cover appearances, and that's what he looked like. And there's the amulets that each of the Sons of the Tiger were wearing, the two paws and the tiger head, eventually is inherited by that guy, by the guy called the White Tiger. The White Tiger would later is the first Hispanic-American comic book superhero in all of Western comic books. Hector Ayala, I think his name was. And then his niece, I think it is, appeared in this series of books. And you can see, well, you can't see, but anyway, she ends up inheriting the amulets that her uncle had. So that's the White Tiger, and her name is Angela Del Toro. All right, so that's that. DC's version, and I'll show you some of those. And if you saw one of my episodes on Richard Dragon, that was DC's effort at the martial arts craze that was happening in the mid-70s, shortly after the death of Bruce Lee. So Richard Dragon, Kung Fu Fighter from DC Comics, came out with two martial arts comic books in the 70s. Richard Dragon, Kung Fu Fighter first came out as a book co-authored by none other than Denny O'Neil. DC's efforts at martial arts series nowhere near the efforts that Marvel Comics came out with. Richard Dragon began his history as a thief in Kyoto, Japan. He is eventually discovered by a mysterious martial arts master named Do Sensei. He trains Dragon in all the major forms of martial arts. In the DC universe, Dragon is grouped with Lady Shiva, the Bronze Tiger, and Batman as their top martial artists. Richard Dragon's series did feature some interesting artwork by artists like I said in the previous episode, Jack Kirby and Wally Wood, who managed to draw an issue in between his work on titles like The Demon, Mr. Miracle, Commandy, and Olmec. Despite the highly competent quality of the writing and even the artistic qualities of the series never reached Marvel's more poignant creations. The Master of Kung Fu series was simply the best that came out at that time. Anyway, so I'll show you the books. So this is number 1, first appearance in comic books. And that's the first appearance of Lady Shiva. This is number 5. And there's Karate Kid. DC's other main martial arts character is the Karate Kid. And the Karate Kid has the distinction of belonging to the Legion of Superheroes. His origin is very unique and mirrors the origins of any atypical DC superhero. Karate Kid is really Val Armour, a super martial artist from the future who becomes a master of every form of fighting art. When the character first appeared, his DC creators did not have to reinvent a whole new creation. Instead, they reached into their already existing DC superhero group, the Legion, and gave him his own magazine. Val Armour was originally a samurai, trained by his father in all forms of martial arts. He joined the Legion when the aliens began their invasion of Earth. Sometime in the course of the futuristic adventures, Karate Kid fell in love with a princess named Projectra. To prove his love for her, Karate Kid had to go through a trial in 20th century Earth. It is here that the short-lived DC comic book series began back in the 1970s. It was DC's second string martial arts superhero, but nowhere near as famous as Iron Fist. Alright, so that's that one. And now we come to this little nugget. And this is Atlas Comics' Hands of the Dragon. And I'll tell you about him. And this one came out in the 70s. Atlas Comics was a small publisher, and all of the comics they published in the 70s lasted only a few issues. The only thing that is really notable about this comic book publisher is that the brother of Marvel Comics Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, I believe that's how he's pronouncing his name, was the editor and publisher of the comic books. And nevertheless, these comic books had some excellent artists, writers working on them, among whom were people like Steve Ditko, Jim Craig, Bernie Wrightson, Rich Buckler, Mike Friedrich, Frank Thorne, and a few others. Enter this creation by writer Ed Federy and artist Jim Craig. Hands of the Dragon is a story of two twin brothers, one good and the other evil, who are trained in Kung Fu in some secret conclave deep in the mountains of Tibet. The evil brother Ling kills their master and escapes, whereas Dragon escapes with a burning heart for revenge. The series was atypical of its storyline, but the art of this comic book looked promising. Unfortunately, it didn't last more than this one issue. So that's that one. That's Hands of the Dragon, published by the short-lived Atlas Seaboard or Atlas Comics. So that's that one. So this is a series that was an English translation of Chinese comic books. This is a very famous series, and I think it's still running in Hong Kong, in China. This is a publisher that came out in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, a company called Jademan. That's what they were called here in the West. And they were published by a guy named Tony Wong and Wing Xing Ma, the artist, who later created the enormously popular comic series called Storm Riders. This first appeared in Western audiences, like I said, in the early 1980s. It's the first time that Western audiences were exposed to one of the most popular genres of the Chinese-speaking diaspora. This series is one of the titles they translated and follows all of the traditional conventions of the typical wuxia or martial arts novel. The Jademan line of comic books featured a few main titles: Oriental Heroes, an ancient wuxia series called Force of the Buddha's Palm, Iron Marshal, and Drunken Fist. The one I tended to collect was this one. I don't have a complete collection of the Bloodsword series, but I do have a few of the issues. Not all. I will only show this title because all the stories for their frenetic energy, constant action, and unpredictable change of pace were really indistinguishable despite their variety. The forte of Wing Xing Ma's Bloodsword really lay in the crisp and detailed artwork and coloring, the boundless change of pace, and the consistency of the artwork. They are fun to read and collect, even in this day and age. The comic book series was filmed by Golden Harvest back in 1999 in a movie that was very popular in China called A Man Called Hero. It starred Iken Cheng and Yun Biao. Alright, so that's that one. So this is the Force of the Buddha's Palm that was also published by Jademan. This is issue number 7, just to give you a sense of what they look like. And that's issue number 4. All right, so that's that. This series, The One-Armed Swordsman. And I collected the whole series of those. So The One-Armed Swordsman is a rare comic book series published by Yung Ting, who is a comic book publisher from Hong Kong. It features the legendary character made popular by Jimmy Wong Yu in the film of the same name, The One-Armed Swordsman. The main character here is similar to the original story written by the prolific screenwriter Ni Kuang, but the name was changed in the comic book to Chen Lam. Leung's comic books look to be the Chinese competitor to the Jademan books. The Leung comics did not quite have the artistic qualities of the Jademan books, but they nonetheless had interesting characters and plots. This series is probably the best of the lot. The first issue of this series is actually the story of the plot of the Chang-Chi film, New One-Armed Swordsman. This film was released in the West as Triple Irons, with David Keung, Ti Lung, and Ku Feng. Everything that one finds in the intriguing plot devices of the Ti Lung and David Keung film is transposed here in this first issue of the series. The first issue, you can see, it's a 48-page comic book, and basically it tells the story, the complete story of that movie, New One-Armed Swordsman, or Triple Irons, as it was released here in the West. Interesting comic book. The art is very good. It's passable, but it really looks like an early Classics Illustrated style of artwork. All right, so that's number 1. Nice cover. And that's number 2. And then the poster is still there. All right, so that's those 2 books. And another very important book that we can't miss, that I have to showcase, considered one of the best martial arts comics series, is this. This is called Lone Wolf Cub. First came out in the West, published here by First Comics. And the cover artist there is not Kazui Koike or Goseki Kojima. And you can see it says forward by Eric Van Lustbader, the guy who wrote the ninja novels. Anyway, the artist there is Frank Miller. The interior art, of course, is all Kazui Koike. I don't know who's the writer, who's the artist. One of the two. But it's the original artwork. So, Lone Wolf and Cub, I'll tell you a little bit about him. This series is the quintessential Japanese manga martial arts series. It features Kazui Koike's famous executioner to the shogun, Ito Ogami, the lone wolf and his son in the baby cart. Kazui Koike is a prolific creator of many Japanese Chambara manga comic series. This includes the prequel to the series entitled Samurai Executioner, and the later series that he would create called Lady Snowblood. All of these series were hugely popular both in Japan and here in the West. However, it was only recently that some of Koike's other creations made it to Western audiences. Ito Ogami is in the service of the shogun when he is framed by his rivals for power. Ogami is then forced to go out with his own son, facing innumerable assassins, all of whom he overcomes with nearly superhuman martial arts skill. Writer ours Frank Miller drew many of the covers for the American release of this series. All right. And last but not least, I'll show you one of the ones that I collected. The Canadian version magazine of martial arts, and I'll show you that. This is a Canadian publication. It's a magazine called Orb. This is not the first issue. I believe it's number 4. And it says fantasy, superheroes, kung fu, horror, and adventure. So it was an anthology book. Features some early uh, major artists like Jim Craig and Ken Stacey. And this is the character he created. It's a martial arts character called the Electric Warrior. And you can see Ken Stacey is the artist here. And interesting character. The other martial arts character that's in here, and I believe it's only one page that he's in here. Yeah, Gene Day is one of the early artists here. Some of his early horror artwork. Okay. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. Character called Dark Ninja. And that's a one-page origin story. Beautifully drawn, actually, by a guy named Marchesano. All right. That's that. And, of course, he would make the cover of this issue. And that's the Electric Warrior in Orb number 5. All right, so a little bit about, let's see if I have something. Yeah. The character is the only known creation of Canadian martial arts, a superhero produced by a Canadian publisher in the 70's. The Electric Warrior first appeared in the pages of Orb number 4, and he was created by the very talented writer-artist Ken Stacey. Orb magazine purported to have created kung fu, superhero, and sci-fi, science fiction stories. But the most entertaining of these were the Electric Warrior series. Fortunately, only lasted a scant 3 issues, when the magazine ended in issue 6 in 1976. The Electric Warrior carried an electric katana that he could burn through almost anything. It was a fun, short-lived series to read. All right, so that's the 70's, the mid-1970s, when Kung Fu was king and the martial arts comic books were burning up the comic book newsstands. And there were tons of Kung Fu books, karate books that were popular back then on the newsstands, in magazine stands, in your local shops, almost anywhere. You can go to the drugstore and find them. Anyway, that was a long time ago now. So I hope you enjoy this look at a nostalgic past back in the 1970's when these comic books were first coming out. And remember this, and thanks everyone for your subscriptions. And I hope you enjoyed this look into the nostalgic past of the 70's and the Kung Fu comics and the popularity of Kung Fu comics back in then. A lot of which I still saved and kept over the years. So anyway, thanks for watching. Okay, bye.